Annette, how have you effectively used different pricing mechanisms in one contract to optimize value?
I have to take a big deep breath because it's not something that people are super comfortable with. So my impression is that people are comfortable with one type of pricing mechanism: fixed fee, cost pass-through, T&M. However, to piggyback off of what you were just talking about around value and unbalanced pricing and risk, we have to be very careful that the pricing mechanism matches the work.
Yes.
So when you understand the fundamentals of the work that needs to be done, then you can assign the correct kind of mechanism to drive performance, which means if you've got, let's say, 4 different kinds of services within one master service agreement, you could have 4 different ways of work being priced. Some of it could be fixed fee, some of it could be time and material, some of it could be cost pass-through, and some of it could be a combination of fixed fee, let's say a time and materials for the part that's unclear, undefined scope. Now that's very difficult to manage if you're not comfortable with that, because you've got to be able to invoice in a way that triggers a fixed fee payment on a milestone or cost pass-through with supporting invoices, and you've got to have really tight controls on T&M. So is it daddy's checkbook, right?
Right.
The thing is when you get those pricing mechanisms right with the work, things hum along, and
yes.
You don't have lots of risk premiums, and you don't have lots of performance issues, because what should be a cost pass-through is a cost pass-through, so you're paying for the actual cost of what's being
right.
performed or goods that are being passed through. And the supplier then isn't absorbing risk it can't control and passing those uncontrollable events through their work in weird forms, like
right.
now I have the wrong people showing up to do the work because it's cheaper so I can maintain my profit margin.
Right, and when contracts are built, you tend to have legal folks who are doing the master service agreement terms and conditions. You tend to have some kind of subject matter expert who's doing the statement of work and maybe the SLAs, maybe that's in legal or whatever. You tend to have some folks from, say, a finance organization or whatever who are working on pricing. And then you have the master of ceremonies, who's the contract professional, who's orchestrating all this to make sure that they all play nice together in the sandbox. And one of the things I strongly recommend, we call it a red team review, but whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. It's a first-time quality check. Before the solicitation goes out, get some people who are smart in this area that didn't help write the document, and have them put the supplier hat on and look through everything. What am I going to find that makes me nervous? What am I going to find that doesn't make sense? And you'll find everything from stupid typos that are actually meaningful to, in a lot of cases, wait a minute, this statement of work is not priceable the way you've defined it. I can't tie elements of the statement of work to pricing element 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. And that's a really, really common problem. If you don't do that first-time quality review before you send the documents out, then the supplier is going to have to guess. You might find you have incompatible, I've got what appears to be a $100 million answer and a $50 million answer. That's a really big difference, right?
Yes.
They might actually be the same with different assumptions.
So priceability. So I've got a great example on that. So the powers that were at a particular company said it has to be fixed price. I don't care what you guys, smart ones in the room, say about we need to do this as a cost pass-through with a management fee and incentives to try to control it. It's going to be a fixed fee because we want budget predictability. So whatever, we're going to do it that way. But the feedback from the RFP process was that this is not priceable as a fixed fee. It didn't have that priceability aspect to it. So what the contract professional and his team had to do is we had to come back then and start breaking things up into more discrete scopes of work, and then ask for a fixed fee for that discrete scope of work, and then another discrete scope of work. So that solved initially the problem of not being able to use multiple pricing mechanisms because the decision was made above our pay grade is going to be fixed fee. However, it created an unintended consequence, which is then transitions and handoffs. Because now you've got a discrete scope of work and a discrete scope of work that are priced to be independent of one another, linked like this, but there's often things that are missing that we don't recognize between this discrete scope of work and this discrete scope of work, or phasing that get lost.
Yeah.
Now, are those change orders? Are they legitimately non-value add change orders because we didn't identify them as part of the handoff and phasing process, but we got a great scope of work here that's discrete and priceable, and this one over here is discrete and priceable.
Well, and that's a critical point, right? If you've got a good deal that both sides really find value in, just a little bit of, trade-off, handoff, and you forgot that part, but it's okay. I'm not really managing the letter of the deal. But if you combine what you just talked about with fixed price, beating them down to the lowest margins, guess what? Any supplier in their right mind is going to be change ordering to death. They just are. Because what you've done is you've made it so hard for them to do the work that they're not going to be profitable, and they're going to start doing things to make up for that. And so you're going to drive dysfunctional behavior, and that's not good for anybody.
So part of what I recommend contract professionals, we couldn't change the powers that be, right? We tried, but that contract professionals at least do what they can to advocate why a different pricing mechanism is necessary for this deal. And we went down fighting, we lost, and the next time this work needs to go out, I think we're going to have a much better chance of actually being able to use a cost pass-through pricing mechanism.
Sure, because they felt the pain. And
they did.
I mean, you do the best you can in the box you're put in.
Yeah.
If you're put in a silly box, eventually, you get out the X-Acto knife and start, cutting holes in it and decorating it or whatever, right? So, you may not be able to on the first round, but almost everything that's outsourced either stays outsourced or provides additional opportunities. Occasionally things are brought back in-house and whatnot, but usually that package of work, even if it goes in-house, out-house sort of thing, you know what I mean?
I do.
Even if that happens, you still have opportunities to improve it before handing it to the next party. So the incumbent might be your experiment, and then you might end up giving it to somebody else later on, including yourself, but at least you make it better over time.
Absolutely.
Jeanette, how did you develop the 4 types of value?
So the 4 types of value, I'm a nerd, right? So this is a fascinating conversation. So David Fringlinger, who's the co-author of Getting to We, the Swedish lawyer, had these fantastic ideas about value. And because we're both lawyers, we would get on these Skype calls, and it would be late his time and super early my time. And we would just talk endlessly. How do we get people to understand value, these different types of value, and how to trade off? And he finally came up with these 4 types of value and how they can be traded off, which we discuss in greater length in Getting to We. And we all understand decreasing risk is a value, right? So if I can do something for you and I'm the supplier to you, Lawrence, and I can decrease the risk, of course, it's got value. But what we also don't understand is that there's other types of value that are equally important, such as they use a case of a major bank. So a major bank has got a help desk. And so every time you get your credit card, you call in the 1-800 number. Well, the reason they prefer you to do that than necessarily go online is so that they can upsell you. Oh, you've got perfect credit and you only used $2,000 and you've got this $16,000 credit line. Let's upsell you into some other card or some other function. Well, now that opportunity to upsell would be lost if I just put in some code on the computer to trigger the card. That's a business opportunity. That's also a form of value. Now, when the businesses can identify, and sometimes the suppliers are the ones that can identify it for the customer faster than the customer can identify it. And in this case, that upselling was a customer innovation on the processing of the card renewals. Is that's a form of value that benefits both companies. But what you have to do is you have to figure out how is it going to benefit both companies. So the upsell will benefit the bank if they can issue another card or another kind of credit or something, right? But then how do we get that value translated to the supplier who came up with that idea around the upsell? Because to your point earlier, it's going to cost money to train someone rather than just taking your credit card number and verifying your birth date or whatever. Now they have to also understand how to sell you onto something. And so it isn't just that the value is in, oh, it's a great idea to upsell. Now we have to figure out how do we implement it and how do we incentivize the supplier to implement this great idea? Because now they are ambassadors for the bank, but they're the third party supplier.
Yeah. And that's, there's two interesting aspects of it. I mean, obviously we're talking about gain sharing incentives and those kind of motivators, but it's really interesting. Oftentimes what we outsource tends to be the kind of low value, labor intensive sort of thing. It's done by low pay, labor intensive kinds of things, right? But it's very high value.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you think about what's the impression you have of the bank, it's the person who answers the call who might not even be a bank employee, you might be outsourced.
That's right.
What's your impression when you walk into a doctor's office? It's the receptionist or the nurse, right? The lowest paid person is usually the first person that you're dealing with. So a lot of times people, we're overly focused on the price equation. We forget about value, and we forget about the fact that the outsourcer is actually the extension in the customer's mind of our business. They don't know it's not us. They see them and they hear them and they get a relationship with them, and them is us in the mind of the customer. And the customer is the person with the checkbook. So that's kind of important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lawrence, can you talk about what you mean by unbalanced pricing?
Unbalanced pricing, yeah. So there's a lot of gamesmanship that happens in constructing deals so that it looks like you're getting a good deal or a better deal or an awesome deal, right? And sometimes it's obvious and kind of easy stuff, like I'm negotiating software licenses, and there's a discount off list typically when you buy software licenses. And if I know what my usage is going to be, but the supplier doesn't really, maybe I get an average 40% discount, which is what they find acceptable, but I get maybe a 60% discount on things I'm going to use the most and a 10% discount on the things I'm not going to use the most. And, that can actually be a win-win, because let's face it, the incremental cost of a software license is like, quarter of a penny or something, right? You have a sunk cost of creating the software. Licensing is just market price. So you're not actually hurting somebody's profit margin necessarily by doing that, but you're tying value to what you want to buy. Well, that's cool in something like software, but if you're getting a service, IT outsourcing, business process outsourcing, knowledge process outsourcing, whatever, that has underlying costs, there's hardware, there's software, there's people, there's, investments involved. Well, now all of a sudden the pricing structure matters a lot, because the incremental cost isn't sort of negligible or whatever, and the price isn't what the market will bear. The incremental cost is a real cost. So, let's say I'm buying parts. There's a machine shop, there's engineering, there's all these things, right? And if I increase the volume, I might have to invest in more tools, or I might have to invest in more people, right?
That's correct.
So the challenge is, when things go up and down, volumes go up and down, what I would like to have happen is the underpinning costs that go up and down is reflective of the price that goes up and down. So classic example, I have a service desk, and it's tied to the maintenance and support of my computers. And it's a monthly fixed fee plus maybe a cost per every time I call the desk. Because the monthly fee of just general, here's my device, here's my software, that doesn't change a lot. If I bought a computer 3 years ago, I buy a computer today, they're roughly the same, high end of the market or low end of the market. The price isn't that different. The capability is very different because of Moore's law, right? But a $3,000 computer today and a $3,000 computer 3 years ago are pretty much the same relative capabilities to other computers that are, say, in the $1,000 range. So having a monthly service fee for the computer and the software and all that, and then charging extra for break fix activities, calling the service desk, buying a new device or whatever, things like that, that says the cost of sort of the infrastructure is set. And if I have a whole bunch of problems coming up and I have to apply more resources, I'm buying new hardware, I'm adding more people, I'm putting in overtime, whatever, I'm getting charged with that as an event rate.
Yeah.
Right? The reason I care about that separation is volumes are never fixed, right? They're going to change. If I go from, Windows 10 to Windows 27, something's going to be different. Something's going to break. Applications won't work. People need to be retrained, whatever it is, and it's going to drive extra effort. That's a big one-time thing. Maybe it happens every 2 years or whatever the new push is, right? But it's not happening every day. The life of the device is what, 3-4 years for a laptop? 5 if you really push it. But it's a while. So if my demand goes way up and I need to buy a bunch more, and the supplier has to have that baked into a monthly fixed fee, they're going to put a lot of risk in that, right?
Yes.
So if I have variable costs that are changing and I am charged a variable cost, we don't have the risk, right?
Right.
So there's a balance. And so that's the deal about unbundled pricing is if you mix and match the pricing correctly, you end up either paying a risk premium or putting the supplier in danger. Right. And, oh, by the way, it's probably going to hose your budget up at minimum. And it could cause other things too.
Let's talk about that, because I think that what I find with traditional procurement is that there's the illusion that I don't have risk, that I don't have budget risk, and that I don't have actual risk when I use a fixed fee, because we're going to shift the risk to the supplier. And I was interviewing someone for a benchmarking report that I'm doing for a client, and sure enough, that's exactly what the person said. Now, I'm benchmarking them because they've had a series of problems with the contract. So I'm fortunate enough that I can do the investigation, make it anonymous, put it into my final report to my client. But what's one of the first things I asked? How did you decide to choose on a fixed fee? Well, because it would be less risky for us on budget. We had a fixed fee. And the risk to performing is now on the supplier. And I said, let me use my favorite online shopping retailer example, right? I choose to buy from Amazon. I have an Amazon locker at my grocery store. So life is very easy. I'm there all the time. And if I buy something from Sally Sue's boutique, I don't complain about Sally Sue not delivering it. It's not Amazon. It's not an Amazon locker, and Amazon's not looking for it. It's the Amazon email. And I'm calling Amazon and I'm trying to figure out what the tracking number is through the Amazon email because that's the portal, right? And the illusion around this unbalanced pricing and this risk premium is that customers don't understand. All the rest of us in the world look at the customer, not the supplier, as Amazon. So if I'm a utility and the utility lines go down, I don't care that it was ABC supplier that was supposed to go up in the truck with the cranes and fix it, and that they did a poor job because they don't have properly trained people. It's the utility that's got the down line. If it's some other delivery, if it's the Department of Transportation that's resurfacing I-5 and they hire a subcontractor to deliver parts and materials to the resurfacing, it's DOT that didn't get it done that has to close it another day, right? And so this idea that a supplier is forced to bake in a risk premium that the customer never gets back if they don't have the risk event, but that's one part that I get really ticked off about. But I also get really ticked off about the fact that you're still on the hook. And if you think that a liability clause in a hearing 3-5 years from now where you're going to get pocket change because something went wrong is going to somehow fix your reputation and deliver to the customer, you are sadly mistaken about what the law can do for you.
Well, absolutely. And let's face it, if it gets to court, you've already screwed up dozens, if not hundreds of times, right?
Yeah.
That shouldn't be the way you remediate problems. The relationship and the governance should be how you remediate problems, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can never truly shift risk between parties anyway.
Correct.
Right? I mean, if I hire an accountant and that accountant is corrupt and stupid and whatever, and I get audited by the IRS, do they really care that it's the accountant? They're still coming after me.
No.
I mean, I might be able to go after the accountant, and if he or she hasn't fled the country, maybe get some money back. But, I'm still the one that's going to go to tax jail or whatever if I did something wrong, right? I don't like doing that, right? So,
just for the record, there is no tax jail, but they can garnish your wages until you die.
You know what? I'm teasing. Okay, we've now determined that lawyers do not have a sense of humor when it comes to the IRS. I
love a tax jail.
But anyway,
Excellent.
the point is you can't really push the risk to somebody else.
No, you can't.
You're still going to be on the hook. And
Yeah.
so let's try to build relationships with suppliers that are actually functional and that are designed to work more often than not.
That's exactly right. And so that segues into our conversation about risk.
Lawrence, what are some tips you can offer a contract professional in keeping his or her eye on overall value when a stakeholder is pressuring him or her on price?
That's really, really critical. So the challenge between price and value is, let's say, I don't know, I'm going to get engaged. I want to buy a wedding ring, right? And I want a really sparkly diamond. Well, there's a real diamond, there's mezzanite, there's cubic zirconia, right? There's a lot of things that are sparkly. Clearly, they don't have the same value.
Nor do they have the same price.
Exactly. Nor do they have the same price. But if I don't know anything about stones, and I go to someone who's disreputable, I can pay the same amount for, a fake diamond as I would for a real diamond and not know the difference, right? And I need the little loop thing, and I need it, right? All I know, it's sparkly. And so the critical thing in terms of why do you have a supplier is, what are we trying to get? If it's a commodity thing, again, it's fasteners, paper clips, toilet paper, whatever, maybe all I really do care about is price. But in most instances, that's not all I care about, because I could have a very low price that drives me to need additional governance oversight because I don't have a very good supplier, that drives me to have to rework, whatever. And I'll give you a quick example. First time I ever noticed this, when I went to high school, which is 27 million years ago, when the Earth was still cooling. But between my sophomore year and my junior year, they put up fences around every building on the campus, and they had a 2-year reconstruction project where they built a new wall around every building and reconfigured the way it connected in with the roof. And the place looked like a prison yard. It was just gray concrete everywhere, right? Well, I didn't know why this was happening. So I actually went and asked one of the assistant principals. I said, what's the deal? You guys just rebuilt this school 5 years ago before I came here. And now you're doing all this construction stuff, and what's going on? And what had happened, long story short, is there's a group of kids walking through the gymnasium. Somebody looked up and went, "Are we supposed to be able to see the sky through the roof?" Well, there's this big old crack that wide and about 50 feet long, right down the middle of the roof. When they went and inspected that, they discovered that they'd gone with a low-cost provider, which legally, actually, at the time they had to. And the low-cost provider poured concrete with no rebar in it. Anybody who knows anything about concrete realizes that's sort of a bad thing. And if there was an earthquake, which we're in an area that has them, the walls would have fallen in and the roof would have fallen on top and all the kids would be dead. Dead kids, probably not the goal of a school. At least one would hope not. So, the lesson from way back then was obvious to me. It's well, if you go with a low bidder, if all you care about is price, you're going to have a trade-off with quality. This guy, in order to make money, shortcutted everything, right? He underbid everybody else, did a crummy job, and then, of course, as soon as they went after him, declared bankruptcy and created a new company. So, hopefully we're not dealing with unethical people like that. But the point is, the value of those buildings was not in the price. The value was a place where we could go learn, where it was fit for purpose, where it was constructed in a way that was safe, and so on and so forth, right? So if you're only looking at price, and you're not looking at quality, and you're not looking at delivery, and you're not looking at safety, and you're not looking at all these other factors that matter, you're probably going to get what you pay for.
So in the RFP process, I have two thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One is that's where performance measures matter, because it isn't just the lowest price for a roof and concrete walls. It's the lowest price that performs to a certain engineering threshold.
Correct.
Right? And so that's how you build. So
it's not just the measures, though. It's actually doing the inspection and having acceptance.
But that's all got to be in the contract. That's
Absolutely.
what performance-based
Yes.
contracting is all about, is that you have to have it to a certain threshold for engineering purposes. It's got to be inspected, then it's got to be accepted. So you can still have a lowest bid environment with performance-based contracting if you've got your performance measures built in.
If you have a fantastic solicitation package,
Yes.
and you do your evaluation correctly,
Right. Which
there's
is
a
my
lot of
second
ifs.
point.
Yeah.
Right. Which is my second point,
Right.
which is that you've got to then properly grade it. You have
Correct.
to have a multifunctional, cross-functional team of people looking at it. So the line of business has to grade it, legal has to grade it, the contract professional grades it on behalf of the sourcing team. Some other subject matter, maybe even a third party, like if it's an engineering type of an example, would grade it. Then those grades come together. That's how you can ensure that you've got the lowest possible bid. Because I do know that people will be taking this course that work in environments that have that policy.
Right.
You're going to have governments that are going to be taking the course. So I wanted to make sure that people knew you can accomplish value and price, but you better have all your ducks in a row. Otherwise, you're going to get a broken roof.
And oh, by the way, in addition to that, if you're dealing with suppliers from certain other countries,
Yes.
you have to be very extra careful about that. So pick on India for a second. I have never dealt with an Indian supplier who said they couldn't do something.
Culturally, I found that to be true as well.
Right. So yeah, it's a culture thing.
Yes.
And, it's the same thing with the head nod, right? Which doesn't mean I agree with you. It means it means I'm listening. It means I hear you. I hear you and I agree with you, not the same thing. So, the critical point here is that when you do the evaluation, every supplier who bids is probably going to say they can do what you want.
Yeah.
They might even be able to do what you want, but there's varying degrees of quality. Yeah. And if your desire is best value, you have to know going in, how am I going to score and grade, right?
Yeah.
Which may be subjective or objective, but you have to have what's most important. Am I worried about innovation, speed to market share, whatever? Am I worried about cost? Am I worried about process efficiency? Very different things. And I could end up with two equally great suppliers. And depending on what my criteria are, pick one or the other because that's what they're good at.
That's exactly right.
If you hire a supplier who's really, really good at the high-end, high-dollar, high-innovative stuff, and you hire them for low-end, process maturity, cost-effectiveness stuff, it's going to not end well.
Right. So what ends up happening is you really need to use brand names, a Ford Focus, but you went and got a Lincoln Navigator. That's not going to necessarily work. But if you need the Lincoln Navigator, then by all means, then please invest in the Lincoln Navigator if your Ford Focus isn't going to work. And I use that example with the chief sourcing officer. We were presenting the deal. We were just about done. And he said, I think you guys can go back to the table. I think you can get better numbers. I was actually negotiating the deal. This was just 2 years ago with a colleague of mine. And I said to him, quite to his face, you're wanting me to ask for a Ford price, but I just got you the Lincoln Navigator in terms of performance. Now, the line of business has given me marching orders that they need a Lincoln Navigator because this service is so critical to their operations. So I don't think we can get a Ford Focus price for the Lincoln Navigator. So something's got to give.
Well, you can if it's fake and it's gray market, which is a flip way of saying
gray market,
you're going to expect them to cut. They're going to cut corners, or they're going to lawyer up, or they're going to do something to make up the difference.
And they actually got the stakeholder to back down. So even though the stakeholder grumbled to his retirement day that he thought we could have gotten a better price, the line of business is in love with the supplier because they are delivering the Lincoln Navigator. So my point being, sometimes you have to be willing to put your neck out on the line, go off the record and say, what you're asking is actually going to undermine the business objectives of the organization.
And that's why it's so important to start with what the business objectives are. That drives the sourcing strategy, that drives the procurement strategy. And the procurement strategy has to have that rack and stack of what are we really trying to get. And if price is most important, know that's a trade-off. Right. In the case you're talking about, price was not most important. No. They're willing to pay a premium for extra value. Absolutely. And that's great. That's actually a win-win. Yeah. It's when you pay a premium for extra value when you really needed the low price. Yes. That's the win-lose.
And the win-lose is when you paid the low price and you really needed the extra premium value. And then you're not getting it.
Right? You're not getting it.
Wondering why someone